Well, Clara and Hyde Dunn were a couple who found the Baha'i teachings and found each other in California in the early 1900s. Now, it turned out that they had a lot in common because they had both been born in England and had migrated to North America seeking a change in life and better prospects, because they'd both had a very tough upbringing. Both had the opportunity to meet Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah. When he travelled to California, they both met him, and this had a profound impact on their lives. Clara and Hyde arrived in Sydney in April of 1920. They did not know what their future would be. They didn't know the circumstances in which they were arriving. The other important element was that Hyde, although by this stage he was 65, 66 years old, he managed to get a full-time position as a travelling salesman. And with that position he was able to travel around Australia. So they were able to spend 1 or 2 years each in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Hobart. They came back to Sydney, but it was that circulation around the capital cities that allowed them to meet interested people across the Australian continent, and also on their initial visit to Auckland in January of 1923. They worked diligently for the next 14 years. I think between 1920 and 1934, they were able to establish Baha'i communities in most of the capital cities. And I mentioned 1934 because in that year, the Baha'is in Australia and New Zealand formed a national body, a national spiritual assembly.
It's interesting to think about the accomplishments, the achievements of Clara and Hyde Dunn. There are many ways of looking at their achievements. One is the spiritual significance of what they did. Their aim was to introduce to the people in our part of the world, in the Southern Hemisphere, a new vision, a vision of peace and unity and justice that was set out in the writings of the faith that they had embraced. But in practical terms, what was their legacy? It's often said that a legacy is like planting a garden, planting seeds in a garden, but you never get to see how the garden turns out. And this is the legacy. If we do this, we can see that within the Baha'i community, today's Baha'i community, people of all ethnic and religious groups act together on an equal footing. Women play an important role alongside men in the activities of the community. Indigenous Australians are welcomed and celebrated, and the capacities of people who come here as a result of persecution and fleeing from oppression are valued and utilised. So there are many ways in which the ideals and the foundations that were laid by the Dunns can be seen in the present day Baha'i community. I think it's important to consider that these values and ideals that they promoted, as well as the kinds of activities in which they engaged, have a significance that I think is far beyond the Australian Baha'i community. I think in recent years, the Baha'i community has also been making important contributions to the discourses important in Australian society, like social cohesion, the inclusion of women, the role of the media, the role of youth, and also the important part that religion may play in the development of society. So given this brief framework of things that have emerged from the garden, from the seeds that were so carefully deposited and nurtured and protected and fostered by Clara and John Henry Hyde Dunn, I think we can see the legacy. We can see the value of what they did, not only for the particular period in which they lived, but for the continuing enrichment and development, not only of the Baha'i community, but the contribution that can be made to Australian society.
They also had a vision of the establishment of institutions, including the House of Worship. They didn't know when it would be built in Australia, but they had a clear certainty that there would be one in the future for Australia. Hyde Dunn didn't live to see that because he died in 1941, but Clara Dunn lived to see at least the foundations. She was there for the laying of the foundations of the House of Worship in about 1958 in Sydney.
In relation to the Baha'i contribution to discourse, I think it's important to state that we're not in this alone, that our aim and our desire is to engage with all people who are concerned with these issues, because it'll be through working together and sharing insights more broadly that the way forward will become clear.